Falling into sweet sleep is one of the pleasures in life. But sometimes our minds just won't turn off when it's time for bed. Welcome back to Savvy Psychologist. I'm Dr. Jade Wu, and every week I'll help you meet life's challenges with evidence-based research, a sympathetic ear, and zero judgment. Today we'll talk about 5 ways to work with instead of against your busy brain and get some good sleep. So, how did you sleep last night? This question seems to be on everyone's mind. When we ask ourselves about sleep, it's almost as if we're taking stock of our overall state of mind. How do I feel? Am I 100% here? And no wonder. It can be frustrating and frazzling when all we want is the soothing balm of sleep to heal the stresses from our day. But infuriatingly, when we lie down to sleep, we cannot turn off our brains. Paradoxically, sometimes the more stressful our days are, the harder it is to quiet the brain for sleep at night. If this happens to you, you're certainly not alone. Over 30% of people have bouts of insomnia in any given year, and the overall rate of insomnia has been going up in recent years. Even if you're one of the lucky people who usually have no problem with falling or staying asleep, I bet there are nights when you toss and turn, unable to turn off your brain while it nags at you with to-do lists, worries, fantasies, plans, doubts, and replays of embarrassing moments and replays of songs that make you want to bang your head against a wall. That certainly happens to me sometimes. And struggling to turn off your brain is actually very normal. Your brain is a busy bee. That's because it is designed to be buzzing all the time to help you remember, anticipate, analyze, plan, problem solve, and do all the things that make you human. So we can't really blame the brain for being active, even when we'd actually really like it to be quiet. It's just doing what brains do. Your brain is also very persistent. It takes the job of helping you to stay safe and perform well very seriously. So, if it thinks something is important, it won't simply say, "Oh, it looks like you'd rather not be disturbed right now, so I'll come back later with this urgent stack of tasks to be completed and decisions to be made." If only that were the case. Instead of fighting against your brain's well-intentioned and persistent effort, what if you work with your busy brain to protect your sleep? I'll share my 5 favorite tips for quieting the mind so you can snooze. But before we review those, I just have a special disclaimer for those of you among the 10% of people who have chronic insomnia disorder. That means you have trouble falling or staying asleep at least a few times per week. It's been persistently happening for over, a couple of months or so. It's significantly getting in the way of your functioning or causing you a lot of distress. If that sounds like you, feel free to try the techniques that I'm going to share today, but know that they are not going to be enough to solve your insomnia problem. In fact, I bet you've already unsuccessfully tried to get rid of your chronic insomnia by doing things like following sleep hygiene guidelines, meditating, using lavender oil, and we'll dedicate a whole other episode to why these approaches don't cure insomnia soon. But for now, don't use today's tips as a hammer to work even harder at your sleep. That's going to backfire. Instead, ask your doctor about a referral to a behavioral sleep medicine specialist, someone who is trained to treat insomnia with evidence-based methods. And for the rest of us who sometimes have trouble shutting down our minds for sleep, let's try these techniques tonight to help welcome sleep with open arms. So first, let's talk about what we can do during the day. Tip number 1 is to give yourself a worry window during the day. So this tip is going to sound counterintuitive. Who wants to program worrying into their day? But bear with me. Set aside a 15 to 30-minute window during the day and not at bedtime, specifically for worrying. During this window, you will do nothing but worry. You are not even allowed to do chores or multitask in any other way. Instead, concentrate 100% on worrying about things that you can't control. Outside of this worry window, if you find your mind creeping into worry territory, starting to turn over again the things that you cannot do anything about, simply tell yourself, hey, I've already addressed this during today's worry window. Or, thank you, brain, let's put a pin in this and address it during tomorrow's worry window. The point of doing this is to build a home for your worries to live in. Give them their own place to be instead of running amok all through the day and night. You know how hard it is to simply turn off worries. It's like telling your brain, no matter what, do not think of a pink elephant. Now, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? So, instead of telling your mind not to worry, give it a chance to get worries out of its system during this dedicated worry window. And outside of this time, you can always defer any lingering worries to the next worry window. Tip number 2, another thing you can do before bedtime, is to download your lingering thoughts from your brain to a piece of paper. So, what if worry window is not quite enough? Perhaps you have a particularly stressful day and a particularly busy brain when you lie down to sleep. Your brain is juggling these thoughts and working hard to keep them spinning because, goodness forbid, you might actually forget to worry about something important. In this case, downloading your buzzing thoughts might be helpful. I like to use this technique right before bedtime to catch everything that's still nagging at my mind. Sometimes, if there are well-formed thoughts worth exploring, I write them down in my journal. But you don't actually have to have a journal or even to write in full sentences or paragraphs. You don't have to be profound, poetic, or even grammatically correct. Even just fragments of your thoughts scrawled on a napkin would totally work. The point is to put your thoughts down so your brain is reassured that you will not forget. You can tell yourself, don't worry, brain. I've written it down so I can address this tomorrow when I'm in a better place to problem solve. That way, your brain gets to go to bed feeling reassured and feeling relaxed. We already talked about downloading the thoughts from your brain onto paper and to construct a worry window during the day. So what about at night when you're already in bed? Tip number 3 is to walk yourself through a scene. So have you ever noticed how fast your thoughts can spin and gather momentum? That's because our brains are language machines designed to be very good at telling stories using words. And all of our thoughts really are just stories that our brains tell in order to help us make sense of the world. If we let them, our brains can race through these stories at 100 miles per hour, making it very difficult to get off of any particular story train. The good news is that there is another type of thought that goes much slower than your brain's default storytelling mode, and that's imagery. When you walk through a scene in your mind, it's much easier to control the pace. You can take your time walking from room to room in an imagined house, for example, or from, say, tree to tree through a memory of your favorite forest trail. Try to immerse yourself fully in the scene using all 5 senses. What does the forest look like? What's the temperature on your skin? Is there a cool breeze or is it very warm? What do you smell? What do you hear? Maybe pause, take a look at just one leaf on one tree. What color is it? How does it feel between your fingers? While you're doing this, you're taking up room in your mind that your brain would otherwise dedicate to racing thoughts. Sometimes, even while you're strolling through an imagined scene, your mind will still try to distract you with nagging thoughts. And that's okay. Don't try to fight the thoughts or push them out of your mind. You will not win a wrestling match with that pink elephant. Instead, just notice the thought, thank your brain for offering it, and gently turn your attention back to the leaf that you were just looking at. What if you don't have a super vivid imagination, or you're just having a hard time conjuring up a scene right now? That's okay, because we have another tip, tip number 4, that also gets you out of your mind and then into your body. So doing a body scan is similar to using imagery. It takes your mind out of the vortex of linguistic racing thoughts and into a grounded space that is much more about the 5 senses. Here, instead of walking your mind through an imagined scene, you'll walk it through your body instead, which you'll always have with you. Start with noticing your breath. There's no need to change it in any way or judge it as good or bad. All you need to do is ride along and notice what it feels like. Use this rhythmic breath as your anchor throughout this body scan. Anytime you get distracted by thoughts, just gently bring yourself back to the breath to get anchored there. In fact, you can spend the whole body scan just on your breath if you like. Whenever you're ready, you can also bring your attention to your toes. Again, nothing to change or judge. Just notice what your toes feel like. Are they warm, cool, tight, loose? You can wiggle them around to see what they feel like, and take your time. When you're done with your toes, move your attention to the rest of your feet. Spend some time there, then move up to your ankles, calves and shins, knees, and the rest of your legs. Gently move your attention like this upwards through each part of your body, taking as much time as you'd like. In fact, you'll probably want to go quite a bit slower than I'm talking right now, and you can just Google body scan. There's plenty of free videos on the internet, free audio on the internet that will walk you through at a very slow and relaxing pace. And it's okay if sometimes you feel too frazzled or your buzzing thoughts are so persistent that it's hard to get into a body scan or an imagery meditation. And that's okay because tip number 5 is listening to an audiobook or podcast. If your brain is insisting on telling stories right now, you can indulge it and distract yourself from the pestering thoughts from your own brain by telling it a different story. So audiobooks and podcasts can be very helpful for this. Pick something that's overall pretty even-keeled without too many intense sound effects, aggressive voices, or fast-paced music. You can use a sleep timer on your Audible, podcast, or NPR app for somewhere around, say, 30 minutes. Wondering what you should listen to? Well, National Public Radio is excellent. It's free, there's always something on, and the hosts tend to have very soothing voices. But don't worry too much about choosing the perfect thing to listen to. I'm currently listening to a spy thriller novel, and it works just fine. What you choose to listen to doesn't have to be boring or even calming. The point is for it to be interesting enough that your brain would rather listen to it than to your own nagging thoughts. On the worst of these nights, perhaps none of these techniques will be enough to tame your mind and summon sleep, and that's okay. This happens sometimes to all of us. It does not mean that you'll be doomed to chronic insomnia or that you'll suffer consequences the next day. If nothing is working on any particular night at this point, I would recommend just letting go of your goal-oriented approach to sleep altogether for that night. Just get up and do something else. Catch up on your favorite show, read a book, email a friend, listen to a podcast. Congratulations, you get some extra me time tonight. Eventually, your body's sleepiness will override your busy brain, and when your eyelids start to feel heavy, that's when you'll go back to bed and enjoy your sweet dreams. I wish you the best luck with sleep, and I want to hear from you about what mental health topics you still want to learn about. You can reach me on Facebook and Twitter. I'm at QDT Savvy Psych and at Jade Wu PhD. If you'd like psychology tips delivered straight to your inbox, subscribe to the Savvy Psychologist newsletter. You can also make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Savvy Psychologist is audio engineered by Steve Rickyberg and edited by Karen Hertzberg. As always, Savvy Psychologist is strictly for informational purposes and does not substitute for mental health care from a licensed professional. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you next week for a happier, healthier mind.